Thank you for having me. Seriously.
So,
Yeah.
also, if you could just, go ahead and speak more about, introduce yourself, like your
Wow.
background. Um,
Wow. Uh, you don't have that long. I'm too old. Background's too old. But anyway, I'm not a native Delawarean, but I've been here since 1960, and I grew up in Florida, in Jacksonville, Florida. I grew up uh, with a family of educators. Believe it or not, as old as I am, um, and I find it interesting that while I never really wanted to be a teacher, I believe in learning and education for children. And I think to deny the opportunity to learn the way that they learn is really an injustice to kids. I do. I strongly believe that. Yeah. But that's how I grew up, with a family full of people that made you do your homework on time, all the time.
what does the N word mean to you?
Well, it's a different. What do you say? Okay, I'll put it this way: the N word has been the most popular in every generation I've been in, and I've been in a lot of generations. Come on, I'm 80, darn near 90. But anyway, uh, at the time that I grew up in Florida, the N word was more or less pronounced nigra, Nigra, and that was those who were, excuse me, of another race, uh, excuse me, and prejudice, and it was a derogatory term. Um, in I would say the 50s, 40s, 50s, something like that, you would hear black people say the word niggers, or yeah, it would be Nigger, and it was a slang for look at what you niggas are doing, that kind of thing. It had no animosity in it at all, but it was still that term, and it became very popular during that time. And black people don't like to talk about it, but it's the truth, and they can look and see for themselves. But the Nigra, Nigra, the nigga, Nigga, or Niggar, those primarily were pronounced by Southerners. That's all I can remember knowing about, because that's where I grew up. Excuse me. As derogatory terms for African Americans, Negro people, excuse me, or blacks. It All of the terms were derived from the so-called cultural term Negro, Negra, sorry. All the terms from Negra to nigger to whatever came from Negro. Derivatives of that people made up, not in the dictionary.
That you've actually participated in an MLK march?
Yeah,
Is that right?
everybody march. Trust me. And I actually, it's funny. That's what we did. You know, at a certain point in time, I guess maybe late '60s, something like that. Everybody thinks that that was a long time ongoing. They know it wasn't. Uh, Black people started marching heavily, I guess, late '70s, '80s, something like that, because if there was such a thing as you're protesting this, that, and the other, and particularly protesting, say, housing or whatever, you could be arrested regardless of what you were doing. You weren't doing anything but protesting the fact that you could not live in this neighborhood, or couldn't buy a house in that neighborhood, or couldn't work here, that kind of thing. And you would be arrested, because it would be that you almost saying you don't have any right to protest, that you don't have any right to protest injustice. And of course, it didn't stop. That's the one time that I can recall in my own head, in my own mind, other than with my parents and that kind of thing, that I was really proud most of the time as to what Black people did for themselves, for us, to protest loudly a given that was wrong, simply because nobody would say to me or told me that I could pay less taxes because I couldn't live in your neighborhood. Or nobody said, I can't get this job, although I'm trained for it, prepared for it, went to school for it, or whatever. And nobody said, okay, you don't have to pay any taxes because you can't get that job. I had to do everything, we had to do everything that Americans do in terms of where you live, where you work, you pay taxes and that kind of thing. And you had to work every day to make a living, to make sure that you were able to pay your bills and whatever. So if I'm that kind of American, why should it be that the shading of my skin would make a difference? If that's the case, if the darker people can pay less taxes, let me know about it. You know, I mean, I'm kidding, but let me know, because that doesn't stop anything. Yeah.
So, how do you believe that those marches or protests were able to provoke change for the N word?
Well, for a long time, that's a good question. You have no idea, because for a long time in my generation, you could count the protest up to 1956, something like that. You can go back and look and see for yourself. You did not see a lot of loud protesting. We protested in a different way through our organizations, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, things like that. But you didn't protest in the streets simply because it could mean that you could be picked up, put in jail, you wouldn't be able to go to work, you wouldn't be able to pay your mortgage or whatever. So it was a two-way threat, not just because of the color of your skin, but because your way of life could be seriously impacted if you were incarcerated because you were protesting for the right, and I hate saying this, but the right to be a human being.
So, with the evolution of that word, obviously there's been some change, or at least what people are trying to claim the word to be.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to ask you, why do you think the usage of the word today affects people still, even if though it was something from the past?
To tell you the truth, it depends. I hate saying this, but I gotta tell you the truth. It depends on the source. It depends on who's saying it, how it's being used, and in what context. Among our own people, if you would say, "Oh, I hate saying this, but I gotta tell you the truth," if we were in a group setting, or let's say uh, going to a club or going to dinner, something like that, we might sit there and say to each other, "Oh, Lord, forgive me," but we might sit there and say to the other, "Look at the niggas eating all that food." Nobody would think about it twice. But these are things that if a white person said it, "Look at that nigga eating all the food," it would be not something that's fun or funny, but it would be, look at what they're doing. And they're doing it because they're Black. You know what I mean? And there's a difference. I don't quite know how to explain it, because the term is bad either way. However, in our community, it could be a term of just casual mention, casual relationships, that kind of thing. The term has an origin of negativism. Niggas go in the cotton field. Niggas get off this yard. Niggas don't live here. That kind of thing. Or if you are, quote, in certain communities, niggas don't live here. They can't afford it. Or they can't go to school here. They're too dumb. That kind of thing. Okay. There is a negative connotation that nobody likes, but that's where those are the origins of what we use today with the term nigger. Nobody says nigger, Niggar. They'll say Nigga. Now, when Black people use the term in casual conversation, they may say something like, boy, niggas ate all that food. We say it to each other. No, we don't have any problems with it. But you say it to me, whole different ball game. Mm-hmm. I hate to tell you, I know it sounds up in the air, or why use it at all? I could say that, but who am I to tell people how their conversation or what their verbiage should be?
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting that you bring that up then, Miss Bebe, because what we're struggling with here as a school community is making sure that everybody feels welcome,
yes,
feels respected,
yes,
and included,
yes,
right? And so even though the majority of our students, which is about 70% of our kids, are Hispanic,
yeah,
we also have a growing Black African American population,
Mhm.
15, sometimes 17%. And so what we've heard is from our Black students
Yeah.
as well, that they're insulted and uncomfortable when the
Yeah.
word is used in their presence.
yeah,
But yet we have other students that are comfortable and feel they should have the right to
Right.
use it, right? Because to your point, they're using it in the
in a
context
content, yeah,
of a term of endearment, or
Yeah.
or a very jovial way of saying,
Yeah.
like bruh, like,
yeah,
so because they feel if I'm not using it in a negative way, then I should be allowed to use it. Where others are saying, regardless of how you're
How you-
using it,
yeah.
when I hear it,
yeah,
it triggers this negativity in my mind of the word was used to basically make people of color feel
right.
less than.
That's right.
So so that's,
And it still is.
yes.
Trust me.
So how, if you were in my shoes as a school administrator,
Mm-hmm.
how would you handle that? Because you have sort of the two different opinions, and there's some students that are like, we should be allowed to use it, we shouldn't have to
Mhm.
suffer consequences or be
Mhm.
punished for using it. And there's others that are saying, please stop them from using it because it bothers me.
I quite honestly, in a school setting,
Mm-hmm.
in a institutional kind of setting,
Mm-hmm.
I would say no.
Mm-hmm.
Don't use the term.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to, simply because I'm not going to take the time to figure out who you are, where you come from, why it is that you're saying it, what it is that you mean when you do say it, what's your basis of
Sure.
using the word nigger, negro, nigger, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, it's derived from Negro. So my thing would be, if there is something that you want to say to a person that's your fellow classmate and doesn't look like you, and even in an intellectual kind of a thing of an origin, I would say uh, to the school administration, to the kids, to anybody saying, ask it in a decent kind of academic way. You could ask me, Bebe, what do Negroes think about such and such? Or where did such and such come from? That's fine. But if you were to say to me, why are you offended by the word nigger? I'm not going to take the time to explain to you every day of the week that nigger, Niggar, Nigger, Nigga, is a negative term that says to me, one, I don't need to know your name. Mm-hmm. All I need to do is look at your skin color, and immediately you become something less than. Mm-hmm. I hate to say that, but it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the part, right? Is that was used because there wasn't given that respect. I don't care to know your name. You're not a person to me.
Right.
So I'm just going to give you this. I'm just going to refer to you as this word.
Yeah.
And there was nothing positive about that word.
Mm-mm. And the darndest thing is, for so long, nobody said anything, including African Americans, particularly in the South. Mm-hmm. You could get thrown in jail, you could get beaten up, or whatever. I've heard the term so much from white people to Blacks in my neck of the woods, Florida, excuse me. And it was always derogatory. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. it would be, I'll tell you what the difference was in a way, in terms of respect. I came from a high school. I don't know if you've ever heard of Florida A&M University down in Tallahassee. Okay, one of the best. I hate to say this, but one of the best marching bands in the country. Okay, but people don't realize, and nobody likes to talk about it, but it's true. Florida A&M patterned their whole music thing, the band, the concert band, all that kind of stuff, after Michigan. Still do. And the University of Michigan is one of the top bands in the country among universities. Still, I mean, it's the absolute best. It has had that reputation. I know since I was a kid, and I'm old as dirt. But that was it was when we would march down the street in Florida. I can honestly say to you, I can't remember hearing in my ears people saying, "Oh, look at the niggas marching." They would say, "Man, talking about Stanton High School." And Stanton High School was well known for more than one reason down in Jacksonville, Florida. There is such a thing called the Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. That was written at my high school.
Oh, wow.
That kind of thing. But there were other times when you would hear that expression in terms of sounds or whatever. And the sad part to me is that a lot of times our heritage is associated with music, food, and movement. The one thing that's left out is message. We can't talk. We don't understand. We are not that verbal. We are not that intelligent academically and otherwise. But we can dance, we can play, we can sing, that kind of thing.
Would you have any message that you would like to speak to anybody, whether it's people at this, like just our community as a whole, on what they need to know about that word, and that would help change their perspective on how they view that?
That's a great question. I would suggest that, and part of it, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the history, African American history, our part of history, is not really in the books as it should be. We're not on page 3, chapter 1, okay, and continuing. So therefore, there's very little known about the history, the contributions, the pivotal forces that African Americans were, always have been, in terms of this country's growth, development, and protection, and everything else. So I think that the way that we might reduce or even eliminate the use of the term Negro, nigger, as a do-nothing part of this American society would be to clearly teach people the real history of our country, all of us in terms of participation. African Americans actually should be, I would always say, paragraph 3, page 2, in terms of where we are, where we started, and that kind of thing. The fact that Africans did come over to this side from Africa on their own, not to this part of the Atlantic, but to other Americas, they were actually trading slaves. People don't like to talk about it, but you got to know your history. They were actually doing business, going back and forth and that kind of thing. But the sad part is when people of dark skin that happen to be of African heritage hit this side of the Atlantic in 1619, all of a sudden we became property and not people. And once we became property, we were treated as such until 1865. That's the sad part. It was 1865. And as such, the growth, development, protection of this nation as a whole from every form of industry to agriculture to whatever, is not really, it's not recorded in the history context. Mm-hmm. But I'll guarantee you, starting at paragraph 2, we should be in every line of American history as such. But by that term, excuse me, by that time, if you really look at this thing in the right way, that racism was so ingrained in terms of Black people being property and not people, that actually to this day, in many instances, we continue to be thought of as less than. Nobody's actually saying anymore, well, you guys aren't people. They're not saying that. Mm-hmm. But they're saying now, you're less than an intelligent human being, less than one who knows how to handle property, less than one who knows how to do this job. That regardless of the fact that we can go from astronaut to mathematician to chemist to whatever, and we're there. But nobody talks about it. Nobody records it in history. The context of historical data too often does not really contain what it is that we've done. It hasn't been written. But this country is this country based on the foundation of African Americans.
Mm-hmm. 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 So the word that should be used today should be a word that really lifts up the people, lifts up. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the part is that it's a word that was never meant to lift up or to praise Black people.
Right.
And so you're right. What people do in the privacy of their own conversations among their own people, that's up to them.
Thank you.
But yes, when you talk about institutions and schools in public settings and companies, and when you're out in public and you're in mixed company, right? Then I think that the most respectful thing to do is to use language that is not hurtful or harmful. Right. And is going to insult anybody in earshot of your conversation, right?
That's right. And on top of that, you need to think about too, or we all need to think about, we should say, why are you using that term? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You got to think about, why are you using that term? Is it because it's something you believe, a slang that you've heard, or you think it's acceptable? Why are you using it? Mm-hmm. Think about that. Mm-hmm. And because I know you can go, I can recall things at home. You could be a nigger, G-E-R, nigger, G-A-R, Negroes, G-R-O-E-S. Nobody called us Black. The funny thing is this. Hadn't thought about that much for a while. Do you know when in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, when we started talking about Black Americans, okay? Do you know that there were protests among African Americans about that terminology? Because Black had been given a sense of being something derogatory. Black was not there.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, this next question is more targeted with Ms. Lopez. So, Aspira paints a picture. Aspira has a vision, overall goal to welcome students, make them feel comfortable, safe in the environment they are now. So I'd like to ask that what policies or expectations are set at Aspira to make students feel that way?
Sure. Wow. Well, the practice, right? So there's one thing about policy. Not everything can be mandated through policy. It's more about changing people's mindset and also affecting their heart. So what I hope what we've created here at Aspira is an environment where all people can feel welcome. And so we have to be mindful of using words and actions that are harmful to any group of people, whether it's using the N-word and offending Black students and others, whether it's using the word gay and insulting our LGBTQ plus students and team members. Like any word that is harmful should really be removed from our vocabulary. Because if we truly stand for inclusion, and if we really do want to build a community here where all are made to feel welcome and that respected, then we have to be careful about how we choose our words. Words are powerful. And so I think that it was great to hear Ms. Beebe's context of how, yes, that certain words can be sort of changed, their meanings can be changed over time. But as long as it is insulting or harmful to any group of people, we have to be respectful of not using them in mixed company. And I would say in a school where you do have mixed company, that we then have to have that agreement. So I would say, yes, we can have a policy not to use certain words, but what I would like better is that we just put it into practice and that our students truly just embrace it as part of their being and part of their personality, and that they just understand from their heart that I'm not going to use that word because I don't want to harm or insult anybody. So that's my hope.
Well, to wrap things up, guys, would you have any personal thoughts that you believe should be addressed regarding the evolution of the word and where the word is actually being headed? Would you have anything you feel needs to be addressed?
The one thing that I would share with you and share with your fellow students, how important it is, define yourself for yourself. So that I'm not saying I totally agree with Ms. Lopez. I totally agree with that. But it's almost like, and I'm not trying to be funny, but it would be like I was called that out of a car at a filling station, and a bunch of young white kids in Maryland were saying, "Oh, nigga, nigga." I said, "Where? And I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but that I remember it. It was that little area right outside of DC. I was just coming out of the filling station and or getting gas or whatever, and they said, and I thought to myself, really? And I said, where? It was like, I know my name, I know who I am, and it does matter in terms of a setting, in terms of being respectful to others, in terms of your humanitarianism and that kind of thing. But trust me, I reared my children to know their names, who they were, pride in who they were, and I didn't give a doggone who said otherwise. And I told them, that's their problem. That's their sadness. That's their loss.
That's a great message.
Yeah.
Because you're right. And I think we've had those conversations with students. We can't control what other people say or do. We can only control our reaction.
That's
to
right.
It, right?
That's right.
So when you heard that word, you were like, where, right? Because you're not talking about me, right? Because I know my name.
Yeah.
So I think that's also really empowering for our students to also have that same mentality, is you've got to know who you are and be confident in who you are. Don't let the words harm you, because you can't always control what other people say. Yeah, that's powerful.